All right, all right, all right. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 4 of the That's an Awful Take podcast. I'm your host, Price Manser, the hostess with the mostest, here to make the most of your day. Hope everybody had a great week. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, so I can't wait. We're going to talk about, do a little recap of last week. Obviously, Rivalry Week was pretty chaotic, and I got a lot wrong, honestly, if I'm being so real. We got a lot wrong, but, it's not called the That's an Awful Take podcast for no reason. So, going to get into that, a little recap of last week's games, and get into the CFP poll, Conference Championship Week, signing day, of course. That was a couple days ago. The transfer portal, and the NFL picks, and of course, Real Spiel, our Q&A segment at the end of the show. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're going to start off with Georgia Tech, Georgia. So, I said that this game was going to be a blowout win for Georgia. I think Georgia's got it in the bag. And I've noticed that every time I said that Georgia has a game in the bag, they either lose it or it's really close. For instance, in the Ole Miss game, I said, Georgia's got this in the bag. And then, of course, Georgia lost. But here we are. I mean, what a game. I watched the entire game with a couple buddies. Shout out Ryan and Bennett. But we watched Georgia almost lose it against Georgia Tech. And, what a game. I mean, up and down. The downs were very low, but the ups were very high, So let's just talk about this from a football standpoint. So Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, and Eric Singleton looked amazing against Georgia. I mean, Georgia could not stop these guys. Georgia's kind of been struggling against the run recently, especially. So seeing Haynes King, have 110 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns, and then pass it for 2 touchdowns and have 300 passing yards. I mean, it was insane to see that, we kind of gave up that much. So, the Dogs really, the defense, it has to tighten up, right? I mean, there's no pressure in the interior. The DBs are getting burnt. It's a pretty rough scene, honestly. And when you're letting a guy like Haynes King, and I've been high on Haynes King since the start of this year, but, you just can't let that happen. Really, you're an SEC football team and you're trying to compete for a national championship, and Georgia Tech is 7-5, not even in the ACC playoffs, but or the ACC championship, not even in consideration. But it was it's a rivalry game, so you kind of expected to happen that way. But yeah, what a game, top to bottom. Georgia needs to learn how to stop Haynes King and mobile quarterbacks as a whole. So that's what I think about that. Obviously, Carson Beck looked great. 300 yards, 5 touchdowns. Nate Frazier also looked good on the ground. Got that game-sealing 2-point conversion to win the game. 8 overtimes. It was an insane game to watch. And, honestly, it was a great game. But Georgia needs to tighten up. That's for sure. So, next we're going to get up into is Michigan and Ohio State. So, I also said that this game was going to be a close. I think my direct words were, this is a blowout for Ohio State. They're going to outmatch Michigan, and it's going to be an upset win. Or not an upset win. It's going to be a massive win for Ohio State. And, of course, Michigan has to go and prove me wrong. And, Mullings, the running back for Michigan, looked great on the ground. 116 yards, really showed their tempo. I think if we look at time of possession, there it is. Michigan had the ball for more than half the game. And it's not that Ohio State, wasn't really in position to score or anything, or wasn't in position to win the game, but they were. But it just, there was some sort of disconnect, There's some pretty rough play calls, a lot of going for it in this game from what I remember watching. And Ohio State just couldn't solve it on offense to get the win. So, pretty inefficient day for both quarterbacks on this team. 2 picks apiece. I really was expecting Ohio State to just blow the water, like blow these guys out, and it did not happen. Michigan got the win, and then the massive fight after. We're going to take a little bit and talk about that. So, I mean, holy cow. I mean, I was just sitting in my living room, and then just huge fight, just probably the biggest one I've ever seen, and at least in my personal, like in my own eyes, watching a football game, that's probably the biggest fight I've ever seen. I mean, benches clearing, players, cops pepper spraying people, flag, and that's kind of like a theme we'll see here is the flag planting. This rivalry weekend, was kind of the big ordeal, and really was. I mean, I think we had 12 games with some sort of hand-to-hand combat, or at least some sort of brawl. So that was crazy. But Michigan comes out with the win in Ohio State Stadium. I forget what it's called. But anyways, Michigan upsets Ohio State. Ryan Day needs to figure out a way to win a football game against these guys because, yikes, this is pretty rough. Next game we're going to talk about is Texas and Texas A&M. Now, I actually got this one right. So, look at me. So, I said, obviously it's in Kyle Field. Texas A&M has been playing pretty decent. Texas has been also playing pretty decent, but don't be surprised if this is a closer game than what people would expect. And that's just what it was, 17-7. Watching this game, it was a really slow-paced one. It started off with that Arch Manning rushing touchdown, and really it was a pretty good watch. I really enjoyed watching this game. Marcel Reed on the ground. I mean, the guy's got to stop giving away plays to the other team. Let's be real. I think teams started to pick up on that, but the main guy who kind of won this game, I think, for Texas was Quintavion Wisner. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. But Quintavion Wisner, running back for Texas, he had 186 yards on the ground, just could not be stopped. And that's kind of what led to Texas A&M losing this game at home. And they had a couple chances to win it, just didn't work out that way. So I'm glad I got that one right. Now this game, I think I did. So Notre Dame, USC. I think I did pick USC to win this one. Obviously, that didn't happen. I thought USC, home field advantage, it would do something, but obviously it didn't. So, Riley Leonard, 2 touchdowns, Mayava, 2 costly interceptions. So, if you didn't watch this game, it was pretty back and forth up until the very end when Jordan Mayava on back-to-back drives threw back-to-back pick sixes, obviously to give Notre Dame the 49-35 win, which you really hate to see if you're USC. Honestly, if they didn't throw those pick sixes, who knows what would have happened. But I think this was a very winnable game for USC, and it really sucks that, this is kind of how it ended up. But yeah, Jeremiah Love is, or not Jeremiah Love, sorry, this guy, Jadarian Price. What a name. That guy is him. I mean, what an athlete. Jeremiah Love as well. Also a great athlete. I mean, the running back duo. I mean, just the whole running offense for Notre Dame this year has been really great. I am a Notre Dame hater, and there's reasons for that, obviously, but that trio right now has been great on the ground as of recently, and that's kind of the reason why they've been winning these football games. So, that being said, there is Notre Dame and USC. And then this is another game I want to talk about. I didn't talk about last episode, but Syracuse beats Miami, comes back from down, I think it was 21-7 or something. Anyways, they come back down on Miami and win 42-38. What a game by Syracuse. Fran Brown did a great job with the coaching. Kyle McCord, obviously, I mean, we've known he's a gunslinger since his days at Ohio State. And he's just kind of showed it this year, 9-3 at Syracuse with a completely new team, which is great for Fran Brown. I'm really glad that he's kind of put a good program together there. So yeah, Kyle McCord, 383 touchdowns to help beat Miami and knock Miami out of the CFP. We'll get more into that later. They shouldn't be, but anyways, that was Syracuse-Miami. What an upset by Syracuse. Puts Clemson into the ACC conference title game. So just love to see a good shake-up in rivalry week, right? Next game we're going to talk about is South Carolina and Clemson. So South Carolina, wow. I mean, I picked Clemson to win this game once again, and obviously I was wrong. Clemson could not stop the QB run. Lenore Sellers destroyed these guys on the ground. I thought it would be like a Raheem Sanders kind of day where, Raheem, he's been great all year, and he's just going to show out again. But it just wouldn't be enough. Clemson's got a lot of firepower, and that's what we saw at the beginning of this game, really. As Clemson played really well, played good football, and South Carolina kind of matched that, And Lenore Sellers on the ground just destroyed Clemson, like, once again. I mean, watching those two two rushing touchdowns, I mean, it was literally just insane to watch. So, what a game by South Carolina there. I wish they got it going on the ground more with Phil Maffa, but, what you're going to do, and it comes down to a moment in that last drive Clemson had with very little time left. They're down 3, and they're on, I think it was either the 25 or 20-yard line, and they go to throw the ball. Of course, they throw it. It's a pick. Dabo, what are we doing here? I mean, obviously, there's not a lot of time left, and I don't really remember that if they had a tight end or not, a timeout or not. I'm pretty sure they did, though. But, what's stopping you from taking this game to overtime? Just run it out, call the timeout, kick the field goal. 17, you're in overtime at home. And, while, of course, you'd want to win the game in regulation, at that point, if I'm in an overtime game at home in Death Valley, I mean, that's a way better scenario than throwing a pick on the last play of the game. But, I said last week, Lenore Sellers is going to have to play incredible for them to win this game. And while the throwing stats were not incredible, the rushing stats were. And that's kind of what got them to have this victory. So shout out to South Carolina. So next, we're going to get into a little bit of CFP talk here. So what is the CFP poll doing? I mean, it's honestly crazy to me. And, I'm an SEC guy through and through, obviously. I've supported an SEC team. I've been an SEC guy all along. But what are we doing here? So here's our most recent CFP poll. Right, so obviously Oregon, number 1, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State. I have no real gripes with this list at all. Tennessee, SMU. None of this is bad. Like, this is all fair. I think this is all okay. This makes sense. But down here between these 4 teams is where things get a little cloudy, right? So obviously you have 9-3 Alabama, 9-3 Ole Miss, and 9-3 South Carolina. So we're going to go through each of these 4 teams. Excuse me. Each of these 4 teams we're going to go through what I think about their CFP chances and what I think, who should be in. Because as it stands, I don't know if you guys saw, but the teams that are not competing in a conference championship cannot be moved past, or can't be moved anymore. So, for instance, a team like Miami, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, they can't move. And I think they've done that every year of the CFP, but it kind of locks things in. So let's take a look at each of these teams' resumes. So, first, let's get into. Let's do Miami first. So Miami is a team I think that should be the last at-large bid, in my humble opinion. Yes, we look at the strength of schedule, and it was not a hard strength of schedule. So I don't think they played a single ranked opponent. Obviously, Louisville was ranked at some point, and Georgia Tech was as well, but they lost to Georgia Tech. But Georgia Tech is a great team. I think they've played well in big games, and we've seen that. We saw that in week 0. We saw that this week or last weekend in rivalry week. We saw that in this upset against Miami. In the big games, Georgia Tech has really showed up, and almost the same could be said about Syracuse. Syracuse is not a bad team at any means. Syracuse is 9-3. Syracuse should probably be ranked, but obviously Miami, they got the early win against Florida. 2 unranked losses by teams that probably should be ranked, honestly. and then no ranked wins. So you really have just negative, but not a lot of positive going your way. But the big gripe with me is you look at the SEC teams they have left that are being considered for an at-large bid. They have 3 losses, and this team has 2. I think as a committee, or as poll makers, you got to have some sort of lenience or some sort of line drawn, where if you have a 10-2 team, why are you not including them? Why would you put a 3-loss team over a 2-loss team? And yeah, I get the strength of loss and all that, but you got to draw the line somewhere, So with that being said, let's go through some more. So Ole Miss, obviously cakewalk, scheduled to start the season. Early loss to a pretty poor Kentucky team who's played good football against good teams, but early loss to Kentucky. Beat South Carolina, blew out South Carolina, lost to a kind of bad Ole Miss team, a kind of bad LSU team, but they have the win against number 3 Georgia, obviously, and then a loss to a Florida team. So, and Lane Kiffin tweeted his argument, and I get it, but when Brett, I don't know how to say his last name, Illinois' head coach, basically tweeted in response to his tweet the same argument, but it could be made for Illinois, which, in my opinion, just completely invalidates Ole Miss's whole argument. So if we look at it here, obviously you have this loss to Florida, have this bad loss to LSU, and this bad loss at Kentucky. Granted, it was at LSU, but Kentucky, it's 3 losses, and I don't think that, personally, a 3-loss team should get over a 2-loss team, despite, I don't care who they beat or who they've lost to. I mean, these are bad losses. And that's why I think Ole Miss honestly has one of the worst odds, or had the worst odds to get in to this final spot. So next we're going to get into Alabama. So obviously Alabama got that early win against Georgia, 41-34. What a game that was. And then lost next week to Vanderbilt, which is, as you know, the bottom of the barrel of the SEC. Gets the win against South Carolina, important to note, and then loses to Tennessee in a close one. Then we keep going down, win, blows out this bad LSU team, and then loses to Oklahoma. And it's a lot of the SEC beating up on each other, which I'm okay with, but I think that definitely, should that give them an advantage? That's up for debate. In this scenario, I don't think it should give them an advantage. But once again, you have these 3 losses, and 2 of them are just ugly. Obviously, they got big wins against Georgia and South Carolina, but they were close ones, right? And then that brings us to South Carolina, which, in my opinion, South Carolina has the worst argument. And South Carolina probably is the hottest team in football, at least college football. I will stand on that. They have a close loss to that bad LSU team, but then they dropped the 2 worst games they could, which is Ole Miss and Alabama. I guarantee you, if one of these losses were traded around, South Carolina would have a much stronger argument. But the committee is going to respect the head-to-head, and I think they should. I mean, if you're going to lose to these 2 teams, that just puts you in an even worse spot. So, in my opinion, South Carolina really has the worst argument, followed by Ole Miss, then Alabama. But I think Miami, it's just a matter of 3-loss and 2-loss teams. Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, 3 losses. Miami, 2 losses. I think Miami should have gotten the last at-large bid. We're going to go check chat here, see what the people in chat are saying. Should LSU have been in the playoff? I know it's really up to interpretation, and it's really just depends on who's making the poll. Hello Grace, how are you? But I mean, yeah, that's just kind of my feeling about these games. Those are the arguments, and so let's get into a little bit of. We're gonna leave this tab open here. But let's get into a little bit of the conference championship matchups. So, the first conference championship comes on tomorrow on Fox. Is UNLV and Boise State in the Mountain West Championship. Boise State obviously only losses to Oregon by 3. I don't know if you guys know this, but Mountain West plays their conference championship at the team who's in first. So Boise State is hosting at Albertson Stadium in Boise. A tough environment for sure. Blue field, blue turf versus UNLV. UNLV is a great team, and even with the adversity at quarterback, they still have played great. They've had great quarterback play between Malik Haj Williams and or Haj Malik Williams, sorry, and Ricky White at receiver, obviously. But it's Ashton Jeanty. If Ashton Jeanty wants to win the Heisman, he needs to win this game, and I think he needs to win it big. He needs to show the Heisman voters why he should be the champion. And I think this game is a game he does it. I think he has one of his best games yet. Obviously UNLV is going to stack the blocks. And they had, I think, Boise State's closest game. Yeah, 29-24 here. One of their closer games against UNLV. So UNLV obviously has Boise State's number, but I think Ashton GT is too much to handle. Obviously, probably probably is the best running back in college football right now. They're not going to stop him. And Boise State, I think, punches their ticket to the CFP. So yeah, give me Boise State, feed Ashton Jeanty, and play good defense. Stop Ricky White to third. Obviously, the running back, I think his name is Jordan Thomas, and Haj Malik Williams are a great running duo. And Haj Malik Williams, even coming in halfway through the year, has been a great quarterback for UNLV. But I think Boise State's defense does enough to get the job done. Boise State punches their ticket into the CFP with that one. So, next up, Iowa State, Arizona State. Now, other than South Carolina, I think Arizona State is probably the next hottest team in football. Obviously, Arizona State has played some really good games recently. Obviously, they beat Oklahoma State, which is not a big deal. Really kind of this begins the end for UCF here. This begins the end for Kansas State as well. Beginning of the end for BYU, or not beginning of the end, but kind of helps put down the BYU. Or helps put down BYU, and then a destructive win against Arizona in rivalry week. So, I have Arizona State winning this game. Cam Scadaboo has been unstoppable. Sam Levitt has looked great. When I dogged him a couple weeks ago, he came out and he showed me, hey, I can play football. And, I love that for Arizona State. It's hard to not root for one of the hottest teams in football. So, obviously, I'm going to go for Arizona State here. Iowa State, though, don't knock on Iowa State. Iowa State is also a great football program and, had two pretty tough back-to-back losses. To Texas Tech and Kansas, which Kansas is a great team, and so is Texas Tech. But Rocco Becht is a great quarterback, and he's got two great receivers, and Jaden Higgins, and I forget the other guy's name. But they're the only team in college football with 2,000-yard receivers, and they just love to air that ball out. So what does it take for a team like Arizona State to win this game? So Arizona State, the key to Arizona State's game is to play extremely long, methodical, dynamic offense. So methodical, long drives, real nicey stuff. Get Scadaboo going on the ground, air it out every once in a while, mix it up, but keep it dynamic and keep it methodical. Eat up time of possession. That's what wins Arizona State football games. So, obviously, Iowa State, if you're Iowa State, you got to try and stop that. You got to get the stops. You got to lead the box. You got to, be aware of that dynamic offense that Arizona State brings to the table. And I think Iowa State does have a pretty good defense, and but will it be enough? I don't think so. But if you're Arizona State, you got to stop the pass here, which they've been doing a good job at all season. So we will see what happens there. But I think Arizona State takes the win this week. And they punch their ticket to the college football playoff, obviously. Next game, Georgia and Texas. So, the Dogs and the Longhorns rematch. I have the dogs winning, and it could be a little personal bias there, but what's an awful take without a little personal bias? Am I right? So I think it's definitely going to be a closer game than last time. Both teams I don't think have been playing the best football to their ability recently. Obviously Carson Beck has looked a lot better from the Ole Miss game, and that Tennessee game was a real bounce back, and he looked great against Georgia Tech and UMass. Obviously, I hope you look great against UMass. And Quinn Ewers, he's been okay recently, and the whole Texas offense, I think, in my opinion, has been kind of slow, but their defense has been playing great. And for UGA to win this game, I think it's all about stopping the run. Obviously, the Steve Sarkisian offense runs a lot of motion, a lot of two-back sets between Wisner and Jaden Blue. And obviously they like Wisner on the ground. They love to throw to Jaden Blue. So I think the main thing is limiting Jaden Blue through the air. Sticking someone on Gunnar Helm, which I think Georgia can do really well, and that's what they did really well in their first game, in their first matchup. So I think this is more of a chess game, honestly, for Kirby and Texas. Texas, I think, knows what they need to do to beat the Dogs, and Georgia needs to figure out what Texas is going to do to beat the Dogs. So I think it'll be a great game. Georgia, they have to stop the run. Obviously, Nate Frazier has been a great breakout star for the Dogs this year, and they got to hand him the ball, and they got to establish a run game against this Texas defense, which has been pretty good. Obviously, the UGA wide receivers and tight ends need to step up. I mean, you saw it against Georgia Tech with the amount of drops. Some, were worse than others, and I'm not going to name one name, but I'm going to name one name, which is Arian Smith, which, I mean, you got to put it together there. And I think he does. I have faith in him. And, we have weapons between Lovett, Bell, the tight ends, and Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp, who's on a touchdown streak, and Ben Urasek. And I honestly think the Dogs get it done. I think they kind of run that similar offense to what we did against Tennessee. That second half against Tennessee, we abused the tight ends, and it won us the football game. And I think they do that here. They win the football game. So that's what I think about Georgia. Georgia punches their ticket into the CFP, gets the bye, and Texas obviously would still be in the CFP. So to the next game, we got Penn State and Oregon. So I honestly think Oregon's going to win this game. I mean, stay undefeated. I mean, it might be a close game, but, Oregon's got a great offense under Dan Lanning. And, it's electric. You got lots of weapons for lots of big play potential. And, you got Dylan Gabriel back there. Could sling it. He can run it. They have a great running back, and then they have great receivers. So I honestly think that the offense is almost too explosive for Penn State to handle. Penn State's, I think, really only test this year has been Ohio State. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match up against Oregon. And, James Franklin, obviously, does not have a great coaching record against top 25 teams. So we'll see that one through. And for Penn State, they have Singleton and they have Warren. And the key, I think, for Oregon's defense is to just stop those guys. You stop those guys, put Aller in uncomfortable situations, you win the football game. And I think that's kind of what Minnesota tried to do a couple weeks ago. And they almost won the football game. But, Penn State's defense is great. You got Abdul Carter on the edge. And if they want to win this game, they got to get to Dylan Gabriel. And if you're Oregon, if you want to win this game, you got to stop Abdul Carter from getting to Dylan Gabriel. So I think it's just a matter of protecting Dylan Gabriel. You protect Dylan Gabriel, you win the football game. You don't, it's going to be a close one. So give me Oregon. I think they finish the year undefeated, and they get into the CFP that way. Next up is Clemson SMU. Now, this game is being played in Charlotte, right up the road from Clemson, South Carolina. So I can honestly see that, I could see a Clemson win here. SMU, they have a great program, and they're a young program, and I think that's what's important to remember. You have a national championship winning head coach like Dabo Swinney, and who's built a roster full of 5 stars, 4 stars, and whatnot, and knows how to win big football games. And obviously they had the loss last week, but Dabo's been in these spots. The spot was gifted to him by Fran Brown. Shout out. And SMU is a great team, but it's really young, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think SMU is a great team, but I think they're too young for this scenario. Obviously, Clemson, I have Clemson winning this game. And the key for them to win this game is scoring points. Obviously, I mean, you look at it, other than this Citadel game, they only score about 24 points or 21 points a game. And if they're going to win this game, they need to score more than that. SMU's team, or SMU's offense, is all about putting up points. I mean, look at them. 48, 38, 33, 38. They're putting up a lot of points. And is that because they're playing no one, or is the offense that good? I think it goes both ways. I think the offense is really good. They have a really good rushing offense between Smith here and Kevin Jennings. But I think what matters most is Clemson has a great front seven, and I think they can really shut that down. And that's what I think gives Clemson the upper hand in this football game. So give me Clemson. Hopefully Maffa gets it going on the ground, clubbing it through the air. I think if they can do that, stop the front seven for Clemson, stops Kevin Jennings and Smith. That is a win for Clemson. So Clemson punches their spot in. So that is all of the conference championship matchups. So where does that leave us in the CFP? So we're going to get into, a little something crazy here. So I have my own CFP bracket, who I think will be in after next week. So let's do it. So who is in my CFP bracket? Obviously, I just went through my conference champions, so we know them. So Oregon as the 1 seed, Georgia as a 2 seed, Boise State as a 3 because it would be the highest ranked conference champion at that point, or the next highest, sorry. Then Arizona State at the 4 seed. So those 4 teams would get a bye. So Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State. Now, who would be the 5th conference champion? Obviously, it's Clemson. Clemson doesn't get a bye, but they still get in because they are the conference champion. So those are our 5 teams that are left. And then, obviously, we have the next, 7? Yeah, next 7. So, obviously, the next 7, you're going to have Notre Dame. Notre Dame gets in. Independent, but they're going to get in. Texas, they're going to get in. They're, the 2 seed right now? So, Texas doesn't fall far. Ohio State, they're going to get in. I think they're a lock. Tennessee, Indiana, Penn State. And then you have a couple teams left. You got Miami, SMU, and Alabama. Me personally, if I'm the committee, I think it should be SMU over a team like Miami. So at that point, SMU and Miami would have the same amount of losses, but SMU went to the title game, and I think that gets them in over either Alabama or Miami. At least it should. So that is my bracket. So Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, Arizona State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Texas, Ohio State, Tennessee, Penn State, Indiana, SMU. So that is my CFP bracket. That's what I think it will be after conference championship season. So let's now get into National Signing Day. So that's what the NSD stands for in the title. So let me switch back over to here. So I'm not going to go too in depth on National Signing Day. Obviously, I've been paying attention to it somewhat, but I don't know. I need to do a more thorough review of the recruits themselves before I can make an actual judgment on an actual ranking system or who I think got the best recruits. So obviously, Texas has had a stellar class. I think honestly the best classes in the nation this year are Texas and Oregon's. Oregon, obviously, they flipped that amazing quarterback who was committed to Cal for so long, and they obviously have one of the best receivers in this class. And but shout out Georgia. Georgia, they beefed up the D-line, which I love. I love Elijah Griffin. I love Isaiah Gibson. And hopefully Justice Terry also commits to the Dogs, which would be an insane lineup. And I think could, be some kind of resemblance to 2021, 2022, hopefully. Obviously, Bryce Underwood flips from LSU to Michigan for that NIL money. that's a huge get for Michigan. They needed a quarterback. Will they target one in the portal? We'll see. But I think that is great for them. You see the top classes, Auburn. They picked up that 5-star quarterback as well. LSU still puts together a great class. A&M always going to have a great class, obviously. Florida, they had a couple flips recently, and a couple guys enter the transfer portal. But, it is what it is. USC put together a pretty good class, Ole Miss. Georgia Tech puts together its best class in modern football history. Featured by two of their top recruits, are the two highest recruits they've ever gotten. So shout out Georgia Tech. You love to see that. Football is better when Georgia Tech's better. So that's great. Mizzou obviously puts together a pretty good class. South Carolina as well. Got a couple flips there. Florida State gets back into the top 25. You love to see that if you're a Florida State fan. I know we have a lot of Florida State fans in the chat, but you love to see that for Florida State. We'll talk more about that later. So, yeah, SMU, mini Miami down here. I think that's good. I'd love to see SMU be good, build a better program down there. Same with team like Arkansas, Duke, Baylor, Kansas State. These teams, I'd love to see them build up their program. So, it's just kind of, I don't really have any thought yet about the top recruits. Maybe that's something we could do more in depth in the future, is go through each class, maybe every episode go through a class or two, see who I really like, who I don't like, and whatnot, evaluate some talent, get that under my belt. That'd be great. So the next thing we're going to go through is the portal. So obviously the portal window has opened, and there are lots of names already pouring in. So I'm just going to talk about a few of them. So let's talk about some big names. So obviously, as of, I guess, today or yesterday, Dane Key, wide receiver for Kentucky. Great wide receiver. Enter the portal. I think he's going to be great. He's going to be a starter wherever he goes, which will be a big school. So I can't wait to see where he goes. Obviously, he's a great wide receiver. And you'll see this kind of max exodus. We're going to get down here and talk about Barry and Brown in a second. You see this max exodus of Kentucky players, especially at wide receiver. And, it's just Kentucky doesn't have the scheme, doesn't have the QB play, doesn't have the O-line to throw to these guys. So, obviously, they're going to hit the portal, which I can't blame them. And, we're going to see where they end up. And I think they are definitely going to be difference makers. I mean, Barry and Brown, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Next guy we're going to talk about, of course, is Kevin Concepcion. Standout wide receiver for the past 2 years for NC State, sorry. And I think he already released his top 5, I'm pretty sure. I think it was Colorado, Kansas State, Penn State, Alabama, and one other school. Maybe it was Michigan or something. But Concepcion, he's a great wide receiver, but here's the thing. Schools like Alabama, Penn State, they don't really have holes at wide receiver. Obviously, Concepcion's going to be a starter wherever he goes. And I think the best chance he has on, being good and playing good football is probably like a Colorado or a Kansas State. I think Concepcion, obviously, he's going to make a big difference wherever he goes. He could play a lot of places. I mean, I think they use him out the backfield at Kansas State, at NC State, but he's going to play good football wherever he goes. So, yeah, that's what I think about Concepcion. I think he's definitely top 3 receiver in the portal. Next we're going to talk about is Micah Hudson. So, obviously, Micah Hudson comes in, 5-star crown jewel of this Texas Tech class they brought in last year, which is a great class. But he's a 5-star wide receiver. But truly, the Texas Tech wide receiver room is loaded. I did a little research on this. So, obviously, you don't get much playing time compared to the Jeremiah Smiths or the Cam Colemans or the Ryan Williams of the world. And I think that's just because Texas Tech's wide receiver group was truly that good. Obviously there was some depletion there at Auburn or at Alabama, but Micah Hudson, I just don't think he really fit in, and there's no issue with that. I think he obviously is a great player, and he was going to see the field at least next year for sure. But yeah, that Texas Tech wide receiver room was just too good, and that's kind of why he only played in 5 games, which was not even enough to red. Like obviously the threshold for redshirting is 4. He played in 5, so I mean loses a year of eligibility there. I could see if there's some sort of sour relationship there on why he entered the portal, and I think he could be a difference maker down the road for a good team, but I guess we'll just have to see. I'm not that big of a believer. I just don't think he could. I don't think he really cracked the rotation at Texas Tech. So next we're going to talk about is Barryon Brown. So Brown obviously is a, I mean he's a speedster. I mean he just burns guys, and obviously he never really got the ball. If you look at the stats, his stats aren't great for this season, and he never really got the ball. But I mean, he's a speedster. I mean, you saw it a lot later on, but he's a true speedster. He can return kicks, he can run the deep route, and he just needs to work on his route running. But I think he's a great receiver, like NFL talent, like should be a first-round pick. So wherever team he goes to, he's gonna make a huge difference. But he is a great player. Next, we're gonna talk about is Jonte Cook. I think he's more or less the same kind of deal with more or less the same deal with Micah Hudson. Just couldn't crack playing time, even in when a wide receiver room like Texas was kind of depleted at a point where people were injured, like of course I'm forgetting his name now, Bond, like Isaiah Bond. Bond was hurt and still didn't get that much playing time. So just couldn't crack the rotation there. So probably going to a lower tier school, maybe bottom Power 4 school. Weigman, I honestly like to go to like an SEC level, an ACC level team, or maybe even a Mizzou, a low tier SEC or a high tier ACC team. I think he could be a great quarterback on a like a Syracuse team that Fran Brown's building down there, or in Indiana with golly, I'm forgetting names again. But Indiana with Kurt Cignetti. Like I think he would work out at one of those ACC mid-level ACC Big Ten schools. I think he would really work out there. Obviously, Texas A&M finds Marcel Reed, and Marcel Reed's great. So that's kind of the thing with Weigman. So I think he finds a job, stays at the Power 4. Next, we're going to talk about, of course, is Eric Rivers. Eric Rivers is a great receiver. I'm not just saying that because I have an FIU dynasty in College Football 25, but Eric Rivers is an insane receiver. He is immense talent, and I think the only reason why, if you look at the stats, the quarterback for FIU, Keontae Jenkins, the only reason why Keontae Jenkins has such great stats is because of Eric Rivers and Patterson, who's the other wide receiver at FIU. But Eric Rivers is a great receiver. I mean, he should be starting at a Power 4 school, and I think he will next season. We'll see where he goes, but probably my guess is some sort of Florida school somewhere in the South. But I think he is a starter anywhere. He's a great receiver. He's better than some of these Power 5 receivers that are in the transfer portal, like Jonte Cook. I think Eric Rivers is better. Mike Hudson. I think Eric Rivers is better than that guy. Let's keep going. Next, we're going to talk about is Miller Moss. So I think his top 5 schools came out. It was like Wisconsin, Michigan, Auburn, schools, Louisville. And for me, I think Miller Moss honestly really fits a Louisville-esque team. A team that is pretty dynamic, runs the ball a lot, but also if you need to throw the ball, you have a reliable guy to throw the ball like Miller Moss. So I could see Miller Moss going to a Louisville or Wisconsin. I think that move makes a lot of sense for a guy like Miller Moss. I don't think the move to Michigan really works. I do think that I think Bryce Underwood would be the starter, but do I think he'll start right away? We'll see. We'll see what Michigan wants to do in the portal here, but I do like Miller Moss going to like a Louisville-esque school. Next guy we're going to talk about is CJ Daniels. So CJ Daniels, if you don't know, I think he transferred from LA Tech. Let me make sure that's right. Or Liberty. Sorry, he transferred from Liberty. He was standout receiver for Caden Salter and Hugh Freeze last year, or at Louisville, or Liberty, sorry. And hits the portal, goes to LSU, and just got 0 touchdowns and I think like 300 to 400 yards at a team that throws the ball for 300 yards a game. So obviously CJ Daniels didn't really crack the rotation, and I could see him going back down to the group of 5, honestly. Next name, and probably my favorite name on this list in terms of player, of grit, a guy who's really nicey, a guy who I like a lot, is Dylan Thieneman. I think is how you pronounce it. Thieneman, something like that. Safety for Purdue. So if you don't know, Dylan Thieneman, he was the leader in tackles for Purdue for the past 2 years, and obviously you don't want your safety leading you in tackles, but stand out safety for Purdue. I mean, a great safety. I mean, this guy is probably my favorite defensive player in this transfer portal window, and probably in my opinion, the best defensive player in this portal window. Excuse me. But he hits the portal, obviously. Purdue is, complete dumpster fire over there. So I like Thieneman to go to a team like a Georgia, to go to a contender. I think he really will. And I do like the move to Georgia a lot. You know, Georgia, obviously, your safeties right now are, you run KJ Bolden sometimes, but your starters are Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson. And obviously, both of those guys are probably leaving. At least Dan's for sure leaving. Maybe Malachi stays. I doubt it. He's a projected first rounder. So I think having KJ Bolden and Thieneman to really be those hard-hitting guys, I think that's a great look for Georgia. You know, KJ can kind of play that coverage role, and Thieneman can play that Dan Jackson role. I think this would be a great pickup for a contender like Georgia. But he's a great player. He's going to be great wherever he plays. I mean, this is NFL-level talent here. So we'll see where he goes. Next, we're going to talk about is Jackson Arnold. So Jackson Arnold entered the portal, and his 3 schools to look for, I think, were Georgia, Auburn, and Mississippi State. I think if he were to go to a Georgia, he'd have to compete for the spot, in my opinion. Gunnar Stockton, I think, is a good quarterback. He's waited his time, and I think he's kind of one offseason away from being that good Georgia quarterback that we're used to, that Stetson Bennett or that Carson Beck from 2 years ago. But I think Jackson Arnold would have to compete there, and I was really high on Arnold coming into the season, and I still am. Obviously, he got benched early on for Oklahoma for some freshman 3-star. I disagreed with it, and obviously when the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma was fired, that changed, and he was a starter, and he played great football against Alabama, and he kind of is a not really a scrambler, but a two-way kind of player at quarterback. He can move, he can run the ball, but he can also throw the ball when he needs to. So will I think he ends up at Georgia? I don't know if he'd go somewhere where he'd compete. I think a move to Auburn or a move to Mississippi State is more realistic, and what a get for Mississippi State, honestly, if Jackson Arnold were to go there. That's not to knock on Martin Van Buren at Mississippi State. I think MVB is a great quarterback, but honestly, I think Auburn would be the best move for a guy like Jackson Arnold. Next guy we're going to talk about is Caden Salter down here. So Caden Salter, obviously, 2 years ago under Hugh Freeze, played great football at Liberty. Last year, their season was not that great, and he didn't look that great, and then enters his name into the portal. I think he had a couple Power 4 offers, nothing crazy. But I don't really honestly think he really deserves to be at the Power 4. I think realistically, if he wants to play meaningful playing time and play good football, he stays at the group of 5. Goes to another kind of team like that, like a Mountain West team or a Sunbelt team. But obviously the Hugh Freeze, Caden Salter connection is there. So obviously he's being tied to Auburn a little bit. But I'd be surprised, honestly, if he goes to a team like that. I think it's more realistic he stays at the group of 5 or goes to a bottom Power 4 school who needs a quarterback. So that's kind of how I feel about Caden Salter. I'm not his biggest fan. Let's see. Obviously, a couple names, Kobe Prentice. I'll talk about, if there's anyone you guys want me to talk about in particular, please let me know. Tommy C there. Let's see. I'm looking for one name in particular that I just can't seem to find apparently. But let me go back here. Obviously, Tate Roadmaker just entered his name into the portal, like literally right before the show started. Probably goes to the FCS in my opinion. Let's see, EJ Warner. What's the name I was looking for? Josiah Trotter. Sorry, guys. Should have had this pulled up beforehand. Ethan Vasco enters the portal. I don't think he should have left. I think he, I think he's just trying to get his name out, see what he can get. But I think he honestly stays at Coastal Carolina. Where are you, Josiah Trotter? Anyways, if I can't find him, Josiah Trotter he's a linebacker for West Virginia, and he was great. I think he was second in the team in tackles, and I think he's a stud. Like, he could play anywhere at any team, and I hope he does. I hope he lands a good spot. I think he will. And I think teams are good at identifying talent. I think that's one of those guys where he is really good, and he will make a difference on whatever team he plays on. So, next guy we're going to go talk about is Joseph Williams. So let me see if I can find him real quick. He's a Tulsa wide receiver. There he is, Joseph Williams. So, wide receiver for Tulsa, great speed, should be at the Power 4 level. I think he makes that jump. Probably some sort of Big 12 or Big 12 school, Big 10 school, somewhere in that range. I think he's a great difference maker. He's gonna be really good. Ball out. You see the frame, 6'2", 195. I think he plays really well out wherever he goes. Whew. So that is the transfer portal. We are going super slow. So we're gonna get into these next things. I had that pulled up. Well, that's funny. Anyways, we're gonna get into the NFL segment. Hello, Squirrel. So obviously we have our NFL picks here. So last week we went 8-8, which was kind of a dud week for us. 50%. I'm usually like a 60 to 70% hit rate. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. So Green Bay, I think they get within 5. Detroit's been kind of playing. They've been winning games, but their defense has been giving stuff up recently. I think Green Bay can get within there. Jordan Love's look good. The offense is super good. Josh Jacobs, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson. I think they have a lot of dynamic playmakers on that team. They get within 5. Miami, if you're a big watcher of the show, you know that I am not the biggest believer in the Jets. They are kind of sorry, in my opinion. They can't seem to figure out what's making them bad, and hence their record. So I think Miami bounces back, gets the win here. I mean, they're in Miami. Come on. Atlanta within 5. So Minnesota. I've been harping on Minnesota a lot. My roommate, is a big Minnesota fan, and he loves the Vikings. He's gonna come in here and say Skull probably, but Atlanta, they need to bounce back. I think they get it here. I don't know if they'll get the win, but I think that defense over there, that Brian Flores defense in Minnesota, has been kind of exposed recently, and I think that Atlanta can take advantage of that and maybe even squeak out a dub. Hopefully, I'm rooting for them. Next, we got Saints. I think the Saints can win by a touchdown against the Giants. The Giants have looked abysmal. I don't care if it's at home. Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito is not the answer there. And I think New Orleans can get the dub. Even with whoever they have at receiver, New Orleans has shown that, they got guys who can make plays on the ball. You have Kamara still, and you got to respect that. So I think that helps a lot of their guys get open, like their MVSs. So that's why I think New Orleans is going to win by a touchdown. This spread to me was kind of crazy. Carolina's been playing great football recently. They've been playing close games. They barely lost to the Chiefs. They barely lost to the Bucks. I think they barely lose to the Eagles again. There's no way that the Eagles are going to win by 13 points. I just don't believe that happening. Next up is Pittsburgh by 7. Obviously, last time Cleveland and Pittsburgh played, it was kind of I predicted the Pittsburgh would get upset, and they did. Pittsburgh then bounced back, got the win against the Bengals, and I think they come back with a vengeance. This game's in Pittsburgh. Obviously, the fans are going to get rowdy. I think that Pittsburgh can win by a touchdown here. Next up, we got Las Vegas and Tampa Bay. I think Las Vegas gets within 7. They keep playing close football games, and they just can't seem to get it going. I think this is just another example of that. They're 2-10, but I think they keep going. They play another close game here. Tennessee. I think Tennessee does win this game by 4. I could see them winning this game by a touchdown, honestly. Jacksonville just lost Trevor Lawrence for the year. Mac Jones, when he did play, did not look great. Tennessee is a team who's kind of been putting it together recently. I've been a big Tennessee believer for a couple of weeks now. If you've been watching the show, you know. But I think Tennessee can win this game here. Next up, we got Seattle and Arizona. So Seattle, they keep winning these close games in the fourth quarter, and I need to stop picking against them. So I'm going with Seattle to get within 3 of Arizona. Do I think Arizona can win? Yeah, for sure. But, Geno keeps finding a way to win in the fourth quarter. So I'm going to ride that hype train as well. Chicago, San Francisco. Honestly, this matchup could be entertaining maybe. I don't know. It's just both of these teams haven't looked great all year. Obviously, San Francisco shut down CMC and Jordan Mason, so now they're up to Isaac Guerendo, who's a pretty good running back, pretty good third string. So we'll see what Chicago can do there. Obviously, San Fran's defense is pretty elite, and Chicago is playing great football. They're not great football, but they keep losing close games, just like the Raiders. So I think Chicago makes this another close game. Buffalo and the Rams. I think Buffalo's looked unstoppable all year. Josh Allen looks great. There's a big argument about he doesn't have guys to throw to. Well, he doesn't need to throw the ball. He could just run it. So, and he's even looked great throwing the ball. Even Khalil Shakir has looked good as a route runner. Has been that safety valve guy. Kincaid, even though I don't think Kincaid's really used correctly, but Kincaid's great. Knox is great. James Cook is great. I think Buffalo just has kind of a deep team everywhere but receiver. And that obviously the receivers don't hold him back. They have Keon Coleman. They have Khalil Shakir. They have guys who can play different roles on the field. They have an X. They have a slot. They have a Z. Like, they have guys that can play the different positions on the field. So I think Buffalo wins this by 5+. I could see that. I think the Rams keep losing these games, and it's pretty sad to watch. Matt Stafford, please get your over touchdowns in my season parlay. Anyways. Next game, we have the Sunday night game, which is the Chargers and the Chiefs. I honestly think the Chargers could win this game. Yeah, it's in Arrowhead, but the Chiefs have looked very beatable for the past 10 weeks, and no team has been able to do it yet, except for whoever they lost to recently. I forget who it was, but yeah, I think that the Chargers can win this game. I honestly think the Chargers will win this game. Lad McConkey's looked good. Obviously, the ground game is kind of left much to be desired, but as long as Quentin Johnson can catch the football, I think the Chargers can win this game. Next is Cincinnati and Dallas. Obviously, Dallas has looked pretty rough this year. Barely squeaked out a win against a horrible Giants team. Give me Cincinnati to win by 7. I think Cincinnati is a great team. Next, we'll do our pick'ems, player props. So, these are my locks for this week. If you guys don't know, we do 3 locks for a week's or per weekend. So we'll do one for each slate. So one for the 1 o'clock slate, one for the 4 o'clock, and one for the Sunday night game. So in show history last week, in total show history, we are 8-3-1 on the pod. What terrible, awful takes. 8 wins, 3 losses, and 1 push. Last week, we went 4-2, so I did 6 last week since it was Thanksgiving. We did our Thanksgiving locks, and we did our Sunday locks. So last week, I think it was Joe Burrow took over, and CD had the drops, and that's why CD didn't hit. So if CD would have caught the football, we would have been good. But obviously, that didn't happen. And then Steelers-Bengals ended up being a shootout, and obviously, Joe Burrow went over his pass yards. So this week, these are my locks of the week. We have Will Levis. I know, so risky. Rooting up the Titans again. But anyways, Will Levis, I'm a believer. Over 208 passing yards, 208.5, sorry. He's gone over this line the past 3 games, and the Jags have given up over 200 passing yards in the last 4. So, they've given up over I think it's like 250 in the past 4 games. And in the 5th game that I was looking at, Love got hurt, and they still went over 225 or whatever. But Love only had 196, so we didn't count it. But I think this is very gettable for Will Levis. I think he does this without a doubt. Next up, we got Noah Fant, over 2.5 receptions. So he's hit this in his past 5 games he's played. That's kind of my reasoning. Arizona's been spotty against the tight end. But, I think, that old Gino dumps it off to Fant 3 times. I think that could be arranged. So, next we have Xavier Worthy, over 38.5 receiving yards. He's hit in the last 3. And I think a common occurrence that's kind of happened for the Chargers is that they get burnt by the speedy receiver. So just looking at a couple games in the past, some speedsters have truly burnt the Chargers in the past, in the last couple games. I forgot to write down who it was, but they have. You just got to trust me on this one. But those are my 3 locks. So that's what we're thinking here. So let's get into our last and final segment. We're running over, so I'm going to keep it nice and short and sweet. But we have our last segment, which is obviously Real Spiel, our Q&A. So, Jackson asked, Florida State, obviously, how did they recover their class? So, let's take a look here. So, Florida State, obviously, there was one point where their decommits were worse than their commits. I exited out. Sorry. But, anyways, there was a point where the decommitted class or flipped class was better than their actual class. But somehow Mike Norvell has pulled it out. He's done devil's magic, and he's pulled some recruits back. He's flipped some guys from Florida, which you like to see. So I'm all for it. I like Florida State. I'm glad they did something, and it's really good for them. And I'm happy that they've done it. They need a program turnaround. They need a culture shift. We'll see what they do in the portal. Hopefully they don't go crazy like they did last year. It didn't work. I think they need to focus on recruiting, bring in a solid class, and build a new foundation. I think they do that. They'll be great. And I'm glad that's what they're doing. I mean, top 25 class now. Good for Florida State. Love to see that. And Clyde asked our next question, should Miami make the playoff? In my opinion, obviously we talked about this earlier in the show, Miami should be in the playoff. They are 10-2. They should be over a team like Alabama. I just don't get... There should be a threshold, as I said. If you have over 3 losses and there's a team with 2 losses still there, there's got to be some kind of variance. There's a lot of 3-loss teams in college football. Illinois, Syracuse. You could name probably 10. But I think there needs to be a threshold. Miami has 2 losses. You should put Miami in, no matter who the loss was to or who the win was against. And our last set question, at least, is from Eli. So Eli said, what happened to Arizona? So obviously, Arizona last season started the year off pretty slow, made a QB change, brought in Noah Fafita, true freshman, and then Fafita and Tatoria McMillan went off. They finished, I think, 8-4. I think they won their bowl game, and under Jed Fish, and it was a great game, great season for Arizona, and it was a great we're kind of building something here. Then obviously Nick Saban retires, Kalen DeBoer leaves Washington, and then Washington has an open head coach job. Who takes Washington's head coach job? Jed Fish, the head coach at Arizona. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. The replacements for Fish were not great. Obviously, Fish brought his whole coaching staff over to Washington. And then Arizona brought in lackluster coaches to fill the void of Jed Fish. Obviously, had the same player, but not the same schemes, not the same, culture that Fish had with him. So that's kind of what happened to Arizona, in my opinion. They should have never been ranked that high from the start. Obviously, Tet McMillan and Noah Fafita are great players, but what are you going to do when you lose your whole coaching staff? That's just kind of the thing that happens. So next, we're going to switch to chat. If you're in chat, feel free to ask a question. Let's see who it will be. Oh yeah, my friend group is doing a PowerPoint night tonight. So, who do you think will win the Hunger Games in our friend group? I think it's going to be me, because I'm just a champ. No, I'm not going to answer that question. Sorry, Grace. It's a little interesting. Oh well, kiss, marry, kill. We're killing Ella Langley. I'm marrying Megan Maroney. I'll kiss Riley Arnold. Sounds great. This show is heat. Yeah, it is. Fire. Will you be attending the extracurricular activities after PowerPoint night? Of course. Why would I not? Anyways, I'll wait a couple minutes, see if a few more questions come in. If not, we're going to end the show. Obviously, we've ran a little long today, so see how it's going. Is Scotty Scheffler defending his win this weekend in the Bahama? I don't know. I honestly haven't watched much golf recently. I hope he does. He's a great golfer. Seen him play in real life at TPC, and it was great. It was awesome. You love to see that. Best restaurant in Milledgeville. This is such a great question, Jackson. Thank you so much for asking. So, we have, obviously, I'm an eater. I'm an eater. What can I say? I love Milledgeville. I love restaurants in Milledgeville, and I love eating at restaurants. So, let's get into it. Best restaurant in Milledgeville. So, I think you got to go really categories. Buffet. China Walk Buffet is great. Amazing food, amazing price. Love China Walk. China Garden, for just general Chinese, is also great. Great prices, great food. Wings are cheap too. Yeah. Love China Garden. Shima. Out of all the downtown restaurants, Shima is the best. Me and Jackson ate there for lunch today. So shout out Shima. Love Shima. Also, great lunch deals. Love to see it. Best Mexican, in my opinion, is why can't I remember the name? Shoot. Oh my gosh, guys. Help me out here. Jalisco. Jalisco's the best Mexican in Milledgeville. Nicer restaurant. Real Grill's really good. I ate there for the first time at Deep Fruits, and I didn't even really eat there. But Real Grill's good. Aubrey Lanes. Aubrey Lanes is great. But yeah, that's kind of my top restaurants. Also for wings. Wings. Wingmaster and AJ's. So good. Love Wingmaster and AJ's. But yeah, I don't think we'll have any more questions. It's 7:08. We ran a little long today, but that's okay. We had a lot to talk about. I enjoy talking to you. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening and rest of your day, rest of your week. I will see you guys next week on next Thursday for episode 5. We'll get into the winners of conference championships week, see who's in, who's out. Maybe we'll do an emergency show for the CFP. We'll see. I'll let y'all know. Anyways, this is your host, Price Manser.